So I'm Steve Williams, I'm a garden designer. I'm really inspired by how we can bring essentially a more authentic connection to nature back into modern life. And I think the easiest bridge for that is your own garden. And I think it's not always the most easy connection to make for people, that a garden can actually be something completely wild and natural, because I think a lot of people have an anxiety over letting plants in because they don't know how to manage them or look after it. My whole thing is to dispel that myth and actually show it's not as complicated or as complex as people might be afraid of. A lot of my inspiration actually comes from abandoned places, and actually places in the city where you might not think nature is, but it's far more diverse and packed full of wildlife than you might think. So when I was invited here, what I actually found was essentially, I often describe it as a bit like an abbey ruin. It looked like it was kind of a secret garden, everything overgrown, these beautiful walls, some of them fallen down. But there was a real kind of beauty to that, which I really loved and really connected with. But I always talk about wild gardens and bringing nature back into your garden. And you can very easily do that by doing nothing and letting go. Mm-hmm. But after a while, it'll be an impenetrable mess of brambles and all sorts of things, and you won't be able to walk out into it. And essentially, that's not a garden. For me, it's about finding that balance, but allowing that wildness and that chaos in, but in a more ordered manner. So there's a real beauty to this place when we found it, but it wasn't intentional. It was essentially a real source of anxiety for Antonia, and it was like, what am I going to do with this garden? But there was something really amazing about it, and what I wanted to do was, well, let's work with that inspiration. What makes it so amazing? And it was this kind of proper escape into the wild, but let's do it intentionally. I think Antonia had just this, when I first met her, we walked through the site, just this massive obsession and anxiety around brambles. It was just covered in brambles. And Antonia still says it now, like, let's not let the brambles come back. But I think she saw my ethos and my wild ethos, and we shared the same love of, like, actually what was beautiful about this. But again, it was like just a source of anxiety and no intention, no framework. Some real beautiful moments. I mean, with all these poppies have come back, and the kind of the rumours are that the history of this is potentially this used to be a dye garden. So a lot of the poppies were used in that. When Antonia put in the glass house up there years back, the spoil they dug out, they just dumped down in the bottom area, and that ignited the seed bank. So when I came, it was all this wild bramble mess, but there were these poppies running through it. Like, you couldn't have designed it better than that. It was just this amazing. So it was kind of like, how do we keep some of that? And, like, fingers crossed, after we finish, the poppies come back, and they're literally,
they're everywhere.
We haven't put these in. These just happening randomly. This is the exciting thing for me, because as a designer, I can have my own vision of what a space can be. I'm having ideas all the time if I'm walking through somewhere. But the exciting bit is when a client gives me their thoughts and ideas, because then it becomes more of a collaboration. So it becomes something bigger and better than what I would have just done on my own. And obviously the client's looking for some help and inspiration. They might actually have great ideas, but they don't know how to put it into a full holistic garden concept. The best thing, Antonia, was the bothy, we call it, the steel structure, is that Antonia was telling me about these memories she had when she was abroad of the rain coming down on like a tin shack and seeing the water purl off the corrugated steel. And I love working with steel, and Jason from Art Makers is a good friend of mine. So we'd always wanted to do like an actual building, but make it feel modern and use a big part of my style is using really rustic hardware and materials, but have this natural, everything has a natural patina for me. Doesn't matter how modern you make it or how stylized, as long as you're using natural patinas, it'll always blend in, especially to my kind of wild ethos. Victorian pond, very formal Victorian pond here, which again was just full of, you could barely see it. It looked like you could just walk over it. But it's such an architectural piece in itself. We talked about, would we do like plunge pool, all these different things. So it's like, are you going to use it? It's like, well, actually, let's just make the space a bit wider by doing something a bit interesting over the top, so you can have a more connection with the water surface. which then prompted these steel grids. But they're just these little details, really working with what was here already. And everything else, the beginning of all of this kind of thing is working with setting the framework up. So my whole ethos is, I love the wild, I love the plants, and I always can't wait to just start cramming it full of that kind of thing. But without that initial framework, this can, again, become very anxiety-inducing. I always talk about the hard lines. If you can put your hard lines, your frameworks that frame this wild, then you can feel more at ease with that's supposed to be wild, and I know where my line is. So it's very, very easy for people to think that a natural garden is all wavy and curvy, and very much a lot of the time it can be. But unless you're like a bit of an aficionado, or you want to really get involved in it and look after it, having those kind of bookends to things really helps. We had a massive thing of reuse in this project. We found all these old concrete curbstones. All of this paving is reclaimed York stone, really thick. So the guys from Minerva will tell you how heavy and how big these things were. But we wanted to lay this and then keep the gaps open so you can let nature permeate, but intentionally. So we've weaved loads of wildflowers through this. We've seeded it. This will eventually start greening up and breaking up this quite large mass of paving. Down on the bottom area, that's kind of the most experimental zone, because I work a lot with, and I get quite excited by crushed waste and crushed substrates, and I think it's quite revealing for people when you tell, well, you don't actually need to grow things in soil. If you look at these abandoned, like brownfield spaces or abandoned places, the wildflowers are often not grown in soil. They're growing in crushed sort of thing, arid conditions. Taking that inspiration, you can create much more diverse wildflower, basically arrangements in this kind of crushed, low fertile substrate. So Minerva had the intel that just down the road, there was a kind of a quarry being filled. So there was loads of stone, freshly quarried stone, and then there was loads of people bringing demolition waste from all over the surrounding area. So that immediate to me thought it's a local situation. So that kind of gives license to bring it in here. It's also the same stone that was probably used in these walls a lot of the time. So we did a bit of a mix with, because I often do this in city gardens where crushed concrete and crushed brick makes sense because it's kind of everywhere. So it no matter how you're using it, it kind of suits the location. I was just thinking, and there was a bit of jeopardy in it, that like, I'm just chucking a load of crushed waste into quite a historic period property. Is it just going to look like a dog's dinner, really? And at points it did, and we had to play with it and create these contours with the stone. And then we planted it with herbs and wildflowers, and then just threw seed at it. And you get in the very beginnings of it now. It's been there a few months. The seedlings are starting to come up. And then we wanted to roll that over the roof. So when I first came here, it was just quite a nasty looking felt roof. So and it's kind of shoulder height when you're in the garden. So it's always in your eye line. So all this lovely wild that I found was just this horrible sort of crappy felt roof. Also didn't marry the surrounding area. It just completely stood out on every level, and you could always see it. It wasn't like it was above you. Anytime I'm seeing a roof, I'm thinking, how can we get plants on it? And usually what I do with that kind of roof is anything left over from a build, it's all the kind of crushed stuff, and then we just chuck it up there. Quite often a green roof substrate is 80% crushed brick anyway. So it's an opportunity to do something a little bit more rebellious and a bit more experimental. So that was leaning into that completely. So we were flowing up from that approach of the crushed waste in the garden, rolling it up onto the roof. So then visually, it massively extends the garden. And then we did ripples of sand piles and bigger bits of boulders. But it was a massive journey of structurally making that roof sound to put all that weight on it, getting more creative and creating these more, again, making it feel intentional because you're mounding it. Mm. Then we're just throwing seed at it and fundamentally letting nature do its thing. Like in the garden, when you've got that immediate connection with it, we've planted more intensely. But the roof, I think it's more interesting to think what actually self-seeds there because that's telling you what wants to grow in that environment, not what we want to force into it. So that's going to be really exciting to see how that establishes. At the moment, it's still very rubbly, but it will start getting the very local flora in it. In terms of the context and the location, and this kind of heritage property, 100%. I've done a very exciting project in Tottenham, in a place called Markfield Park, which was one of the first sewage works in Britain. So that was a real heritage site in itself, but it was all concrete walls and graffiti. And again, makes complete sense when you start crushing up concrete and throwing that around it. I'm kind of in my element there. It's like a real representation of what's in my head. So coming into this, it was like, I'd really like to do that, but I don't want to do something that really jars it. I could very easily just say, let's just chuck it, and it wouldn't have suited it. And it was this layering and trial and error and just throwing some stuff down, looking at it. No, it looks rubbish. Throwing some more stuff down until it suddenly started feeling purposeful and like it suited. The main thing was matching the stone. As soon as we found that blend of that yellowy kind of bath stone or that kind of local stone, suddenly made it feel like it tied into the walls. I really wanted to conjure that feeling of maybe that idea that, because when I found it, the walls, some of it had fallen down. So it's getting that kind of feeling, but not making it feel contrived. The design process, it always starts the same. So have the site visit. We'll spitball ideas with the client, just get some initial, we'll essentially come up with a brief and a wish list. And I always say that's the most important part, because you can always, when you get into the journey, the fun bit, getting creative, you can always refer back to, are we hitting the brief? Have we got everything we want on the wish list? It also aligns you so you both know what you're aiming for. As soon as I've got that down, I've then got those seeds of those ideas, the idea of the water coming off the steel, reusing things, getting Antonia's vision of what it can be, then putting it through my lens. Then it's getting a survey done. So we had a full topographical survey done of this. So we had all the heights and levels. So it was all I had the plan there. Then I rub out a lot of the existing stuff, and then I start, right, what are the things I want to keep them on the plan. More often than not, I'm thinking, how do we keep it as simple as possible? Because I know the crazy stuff's going to come with the planting. So how do we keep that framework simple? So essentially I start with what we call shape work. So I start using a grid method where I'll start doing meters, 2 meters, very simple, just drawing shapes, drawing lines, so it feels like a composition. But I always know I'm going to fill it with trees and plants. And it's always, even from the very beginning, I can't wait to actually it be built and put the plants in. And the planting side of it is kind of a key thing to my ethos, because when I walked into this place, like with any garden, especially if it's overgrown, what you're witnessing is how nature wants to be, really. And the way plants grow together generally follows a system. It's like a tiered system. So what we're mimicking in the open areas, in the open aspect where it's really sunny and we're using the rubble method, we're mimicking kind of a brownfield approach. So it's the first stage of succession. So we're throwing seed at it to get that brownfield feeling. So that's like perfect for wildflowers. And because it's sunny, it matches that kind of approach. Where we are now, we're sat in the food forest. And food forest, it's like any project I do, it's like a mixture of these two things. And in here, we've got a tiered system of food forestry. So it mimics the way plants grow in the wild. So you've got top tree canopies. So here we've got silver birches. Then we've got a lower tier of fruit trees. Then the next layer is fruit and shrubs. Then we've got a mix of perennial vegetables and wildflowers. And then at the base, it's all a rambling ground cover. But every single thing in here is either edible, medicinal, or it's helping create kind of equilibrium, build soil structure, give nutrients. So even the birch trees have a relationship with building nitrogen in the soil. The fruit trees obviously providing fruit, but everything underneath them, you've got things like comfrey, I put comfreys next to every fruit tree because it helps the fruit. So everything in here they have deep tap roots or they're mineral miners. So there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. The most accessible thing about food forestry for me, and why people really resonate with it, is that people often think they want to grow food. And I say, okay, but how much time are you actually going to put into growing food? And if you really want to do it, brilliant. but most people don't have that connection yet. They like the idea of it. They want to create raised beds, but that's your whole garden. Invariably, we all live busy lives now, so we can't be out there growing all our food. So those raised beds become just weed troughs. So then, again, it becomes a source of anxiety. Food forestry for me is embracing the wildness, where you throw it all in together. Then you can just walk through the easiest, most accessible method. Loads of this is brilliant for salads. So you can just walk through here and make an amazing salad. That wild bank with the bothy on it was, there was already fruit trees in there. So there was a really old apple tree, a fig tree, a couple of apple trees actually. And I spoke to the neighbour, and apparently there was an orchard in here. So and they were the remnants of that. So obviously, that's music to my ears. If there was already, that's basically telling me I can do my concept because it's already there. So we kept the apple trees, but then the whole idea was, yes, we're in the food forest here, but let's just ripple this edible element through all of it. But it was impenetrable. You had to really whack through it, brambles everywhere. Really beautifully wild, but you couldn't get into it. It's exactly that kind of thing, of that impenetrable wild. I loved that. So let's bring that back in more intentionally, but let's put something in the middle of it that's almost elevated through it, that creates this focal point and this destination. And I love doing garden buildings. I love that kind of architecture, putting that into a garden and that space where you can go and be somewhere else and escape and just this otherworldly experience. So it's the idea of this building on stilts and then these floating gridded walkways, so you can see plants start growing up through it. So eventually, once it's immersed, it's actually pretty immersed already. That wild bank, we threaded loads more young fruit trees through it, then again threw seed at it. It's interesting to see how differently the seed behaves on that bank than in the rubble areas, because the soil is completely different. So you get that immediate flush of all the wildflowers coming. It's actually been brilliant for that area. It's much slower in the rubble areas, showing that it does make a big difference. Antonia's vision for this was to create. She loved the idea of having it as a gallery space, but it wasn't like it was going to be a gallery all year round. So my solution was, I really love the idea because it's a brilliant use of these old walls, and to have a space like this and invite other people into it is a lovely kind of notion. But what you didn't want it to feel like is a gallery, because if it all the rest of the year, when it's not a gallery, it's just going to be a waste of space. So we made sure we kept pockets of the walls clear, but all the other time it was just full of this food forestry stuff. So there's stretches of walls that are bare, but the idea was it didn't feel like they were bare. It just felt like, oh, that's just a beautiful old wall. But times where there might be a gallery or an event, you can do whatever you want on those walls, and you've kind of got this gallery space. So up the back of the bothy, you've got a whole stretch, and it's probably the quietest area. And you lead up to the back corner where there was this little seating area already. And again, it's a journey. So if all these walls are adorned with artwork, you've got a proper... It's an exploration in here anyway, but to then find sculptures and bits of artwork is extra. So if there's going to be events in there, and obviously there's a family who lives here most of the time, so it is a space. We needed a space where it was like a gathering spot, socialising spot. The other areas are kind of almost secret gardens. They feel a little bit more for the family. Down there, it's kind of this entertainment zone where you've got a fire pit, outdoor kitchen, surrounded by all these herbs and edible stuff which you can use. But it's open, and you've got these big reclaimed. So these are salvaged from a place called Ashwell's Timber, where a lot of it's salvaged from dilapidated piers. But it's a tropical hardwood. But because it's salvaged, it doesn't mean the carbon footprint. We can use it because it's a reclaimed material. But it also will last forever. This is called ironwood, so it's super tough. So we've got these very informal stacks, which act as just seats and perch points, and then this island in the middle of it, where I often use this phrase, a do what you want on it kind of thing, where it's not like a formal bench or seating area. You sit on it, lie on it, put things on it. Just becomes a really informal area to kind of just chill out. Chill out zone is what I called it originally. It's crucial to marry up. Obviously, these are very old, and there's a lot of weathering in patina, which is lovely. a lot of that stone down there is fresh, so it's much more yellowy.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, it's the same kind of stone, which then visually ties in. Quite often I'll use boulders in my designs. I'll bring stone as much as I can. But if it's a different stone to what's there, that's why concrete works in a city. I love doing a concrete boulder. But if I was bringing in a completely different stone, it might not marry up the same way. The lawn is always I sometimes see this moment of relief on people's face when they say, when I tell them they don't have to have a lawn if they're not going to use it. I think Antonio originally said, oh, maybe we could just make that lawn. I think it's a common thing for people to think, where's the lawn? We could just make that lawn. I'll always say, like, well, why do you want one? Like, that's always my first question. If you want one, like, they're brilliant for kids and to have that tactile thing with the earth, it's brilliant. But you've got to mow it, and you've got to maintain it. And before long, it doesn't really behave like a lawn. And unless you're going to be religiously going out there, perhaps maybe isn't the best use of the space. If all that space down there was lawn, it would have a completely different feel to it. Through the seasons now, that's a proper hard stand-in. Like, you can use that all through the seasons and kind of do whatever you want there. A lawn would have completely changed that. And Antonia was totally on board with that. I think she was like, oh, right, okay, cool. Well, I don't have to keep mowing it. I think that's the main thing. People think, oh, God, I don't have to keep going out with a lawnmower for this lawn that no one really uses. I think this has been a brilliant opportunity and actually a real testament to Antonia, really, to believe in the vision. It's not always the case that someone embraces the kind of things you're putting forward, especially when they're a bit radical and a bit different like this. And to have that kind of backing, and everyone, kind of guys at Minerva, Jason, art makers, like there was just a belief in what we were trying to achieve. And without that belief, then you don't end up getting to this point. So I think to have got here is amazing. I always say that a garden's never really finished. Like, it's not just a case of, right, we're done and we're out of here. Like this, all of the planting will always ebb and flow. That's the beauty of it to me. And that what I would love to see is the family have a connection, which they've already started. They've already come out here picking salads. I see them doing it. They're looking in the pond. They're sunbathing in different spots. That's the moment of success for me. But that connection just grows. That's what I always want to see in a garden. And having this ability, as you say, to feel like you can let go, rather than feel like I've got to get out there and the weeds are everywhere and all this stuff. It's a complete weight off the shoulders. So you can just enjoy it, really. I want to keep coming back here and seeing how it develops for years to come.